Welcome, everyone, to episode 455 of Just Joshing. I'm your host, Joshua Pentelaresco. I write stuff in podcast too, and today is storytime. I'm reading from Alice in Wonderland. The Duchess and the Pig is definitely the big thing here, but we'll get to that in a minute. So this is also going to be kind of a new format for this show, because if you guys haven't paid attention, I don't just do audio shows anymore. I do video shows as well. I'm on regularly on twitch.tv/JustJoshingPodcast, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. Occasionally I might have something on Wednesday, but if I do, it'll be probably just for my Patreons. So if you are listening to me and you want to subscribe to my Patreon, this would be a great incentive to do it. I will let people know what's going on with that, in a not too distant future. But first, I gotta talk about my week and everything I'm doing. This is going to be the episode where I update with everything, and then I'll get to the story, and then I'll get to my guest, which is Deven Kane, who's reading from his book, and it's an amazing read. And honestly, I was genuinely flattered at the first couple of minutes. He actually took a minute to actually praise me, and I'm very flattered about that. And Deven is my guest tomorrow night on Twitch TV, so he's getting a double header here. He's getting the reading slot, and he's getting an actual episode guest. First week, it was kind of cool. I had a great lineup of people. I really, really enjoyed my conversation with William Holland. I really love that guy. That guy is crazy talented, but I loved everything. I couldn't have asked Jennifer Gordon. It was a wonderful guest to open up the week with. And then following that up with Kurt Zauer. Both of them had been on my previous shows. Like, Kurt was kind of like a guinea pig, so it was cool to actually have him officially on the show. And he did wonderful with his Kickstarter. Kurt, congratulations to you. Then William. William is just incredibly gifted, and that was a fun, thrilling hour in my world. That was just great. And then I concluded that with a wonderful conversation and drink and draw with Anvu. I mean, that's a hell of a week, and I got a cool week coming up this week too. Deven Kane's tomorrow. Marnie Young, the audio sorceress, is back to join finally this new format. Randy McCharles is back this week as well. And then I have a new drink and draw. Joshua Harms is my guest this week on the drink and draw. And Wednesday there's a special little fun surprise for those that want to actually subscribe to my Twitch, YouTube. That stuff is going to be cool. I'm still going to do occasional surprises here and there, and it'll probably be Wednesdays when I do them. Working on my last release of the year. I want to do The Lights Go Out as a Christmas Day release. I'm hoping to finish the draft this week. Do some quick revisions all the way to the 10th of December. Try to get a quick edit time, and then just release the damn thing for December 25th. Kind of see how my writing style has evolved this year at this as well. There's definitely a desire to evolve and grow, and I think hopefully everything I've learned this year as a writer will come to fruition. I just kind of have at least one more column out this year, maybe two. This week's first comics is going to be probably for review of Crossover number 1, which was a fun read. And yeah, like I said, that's kind of everything right now. So, and I gotta say something too. This is their last month sponsoring me. I want to thank Indie Imprint for a hell of a partnership and sponsorship. You guys were great. I thank you very much for helping me get to where I'm at. Mike, Jess, you guys are welcome to come on my show anytime you like, just as a guest. I adore that you have put so much time, effort, and energy into me. I wish the relationship wasn't over, but I understand just with the way things are that there has to be. Thank you for everything you've done for me, and I appreciate it. So let's get to my reading, and let's get to my sponsor, shall we?
This episode of Just Joshing is sponsored by Indie Imprint. Indie Imprint supports creators by creators. Whether you are writing a book or creating a video game, Indie Imprint works with its clients to produce, edit, and present their projects to the world. For more information, check out their website at www.indieimprint.com.
Chapter 6. Pig and Pepper. For a minute or two she stood looking at the house, and wondering what to do next, when suddenly a footman in livery came running out of the wood. She considered him to be a footman because he was in livery. Otherwise, judging by his face only, she would have called him a fish. And rapped loudly at the door with his knuckles. It was opened by another footman of livery with a round face and large eyes like a frog, and both footmen, Alice noticed, had powdered hair that curled all over their heads. She felt very curious to know what it was all about, and crept a little way out of the wood to listen. The fish footman began by producing from under his arm a great letter, nearly as large as himself, to be handed over to the other, saying in a solemn tone, For the Duchess. An invitation from the Queen to play croquet. The frog footman repeated in the same solemn tone, only changing the order of the words a little. From the Queen. An invitation for the Duchess to play croquet. Then they both bowed, and their curls got entangled together. Alice laughed so much at this that she had to run back into the wood for fear of their hearing her, and when she next peeped out, the fish footman was gone, and the other was sitting on the ground near the door, staring stupidly up into the sky. Alice went timidly up to the door and knocked. "There's no sort of use in knocking," said the footman, "and that for 2 reasons. First, because I'm on the same side of the door as you are. Secondly, because they're making such a noise inside, so no one could possibly hear you." And certainly there was a most extraordinary noise going on within, a constant howling and sneezing, and every now and then a great crash, as if a dish or kettle had been broken to pieces. "Please, then," said Alice, "how am I to get in? There might be some sense in your knocking," the footman went on, without attending to her, "if we had a door between us. For instance, if you were inside, you might knock and I could let you out, you know." He was looking up into the sky all the time he was speaking, and this Alice thought decidedly uncivil. "But perhaps he can't help it," she said to herself. "His eyes are so very nearly at the top of his head, but at any rate he might answer questions. How am I to get in?" she repeated aloud. "I shall sit here," the footman remarked, "till tomorrow." At that moment the door of the house opened, and a large plate came skimming out, straight at the footman's head. It just grazed his nose, and broke his to pieces against one of the trees behind him. "Or next day, maybe," the footman continued in the same tone, exactly as if nothing had happened. "How am I to get in?" asked Alice again in a louder tone. "Are you to get in at all?" said the footman. "That's the first question, you know." It was, no doubt, only Alice did not like to be told so. "It's really dreadful," she muttered to herself. "The way all the creatures argue, it's enough to drive one crazy." The footman seemed to think this a good opportunity for repeating his remark with variations. "I shall sit here," he said, "on and off, for days and days. But what am I to do?" said Alice. "Anything you like," said the footman, and began whistling. "Oh, there's no use in talking to him," said Alice desperately. "He's perfectly idiotic." And she opened the door and went in. The door led right into a large kitchen, which was full of smoke from one end to the other. The Duchess was sitting on a 3-legged stool in the middle, nursing a baby. The cook was leaning over the fire, stirring a large cauldron which seemed to be full of soup. "There's certainly too much pepper in that soup," Alice said to herself, as well as she could for sneezing. There was certainly too much of it in the air. Even the Duchess sneezed occasionally, and as for the baby, it was sneezing and howling alternately without a moment's pause. The only 2 creatures in the kitchen that did not sneeze were the cook and a large cat, who was lying on the hearth and grinning from ear to ear. "Please, would you tell me," said Alice a little timidly, for she was not quite sure whether it was good manners for her to speak first, "why your cat grins like that?" "It's a Cheshire cat," said the Duchess, "and that's why." "Pig!" she said the last word with such sudden violence that Alice quite jumped, but she saw in another moment that it was addressed to the baby, and not to her, so she took courage and went on again. "I didn't know that Cheshire cats always grinned. In fact, I didn't know that cats could grin." "They all can," said the Duchess, "and most of them do." "I don't know of any that do," Alice said very politely, feeling quite pleased to have got into a conversation. "You don't know much," said the Duchess, "and that's a fact." Alice did not at all like the tone of this remark, and thought it would be well to introduce some other subject of conversation. While she was trying to fix on one, the cook took the cauldron of soup off the fire, and at once set to work throwing everything within her reach at the Duchess and the baby. The fire irons came first, then followed a shower of saucepans, plates, and dishes. The Duchess took no notice of them, even when they hit her, and the baby was howling so much already that it was quite impossible to say whether the blows hurt or it not. "Oh, please mind what you're doing," cried Alice, jumping up and down in an agony of terror. "Oh, there goes his precious nose!" as an unusually large saucepan flew close by it, and very nearly carried it off. "If everybody minded their own business," the Duchess said in a hoarse growl, "the world would go round a great deal faster than it does." "Which would not be an advantage," said Alice, who felt very glad to get an opportunity of showing off a little of her knowledge. "Just think what work it would make the day and night. You see, the Earth takes 24 hours to turn around on its axis." "Talking of axis," said the Duchess, "chop off her head!" Alice glanced rather anxiously at the cook to see if she meant to take the hint, but the cook was busily stirring the soup, and seemed not to be listening, so she went on again. 24 hours, I think. Or is it 12? Oh, don't bother me," said the Duchess. "I never could abide figures." And with that she began nursing her child again, singing a sort of lullaby as she did so, and giving it a violent shake at the end of every line. Speak roughly to your little boy and beat him when he sneezes. He only does it to annoy because he knows it teases. In which the cook and baby join, wow, wow, wow. While the Duchess sang the second verse of the song, she kept tossing the baby violently up and down, and the poor little thing howled so that Alice could hardly hear the words. I speak severely to my boy, I beat him when he sneezes, for he can thoroughly enjoy the pepper when he pleases. Wow, wow, wow. Here, you may nurse it a bit, if you like, the Duchess said to Alice, flinging the baby at her as she spoke. I must go and get ready to play croquet with the Queen. And she hurried out of the room. The cook threw a frying pan at her as she went, but it just missed her. Alice caught the baby with some difficulty, as it was a queer-shaped little creature, and held out its arms and legs in all directions. Just like a starfish, thought Alice. The poor little thing was snorting like a steam engine when she caught it, and kept doubling itself up and straightening itself out again, so that altogether, for the first minute or two, it was as much as she could do to hold it. As soon as she made out the proper way of nursing it, which was to twist it up into a sort of knot, and then keep a tight hold of it right ear and left foot so to prevent its undoing itself, she carried it out into the open air. If I don't just take this child away with me, thought Alice, they're sure to kill it in a day or two. Wouldn't it be murder to leave it behind? She said the last words out loud, and the little thing grunted in reply. It had left off sneezing by this time. Don't grunt, said Alice. That's not all a proper way of expressing yourself. The baby grunted again, and Alice looked very anxiously into its face to see what was the matter with it. This could be no doubt that it had a very turn-up nose, much more like the snout than a real nose. Also, its eyes were getting extremely small for a baby. Altogether, Alice did not like the look of the thing at all. But perhaps it was only sobbing, she thought, and looked into its eyes again to see if there were any tears. No, there were no tears. If you're going to turn into a pig, my dear, said Alice seriously, I'll have nothing more to do with you. Mind now! The poor little thing sobbed again, or grunted, it was impossible to say which, and they went on for some while in silence. Alice was just beginning to think to herself, now what am I going to do with this creature when I get it home? When it grunted again, and so violently that she looked down into its face in some alarm. This time there could be no mistake about it. This time it was neither more nor less than a pig, and she felt that it would be quite absurd for her to carry it any further. So she set the little creature down and felt quite relieved to see it draw away quietly into the wood. If it had grown up, she said to herself, it would have made a dreadfully ugly child, but makes a rather handsome pig, I think. And she began thinking over other children she knew, who might very well do be pigs, and was just saying to herself, if only one knew the right way to change them, when she was a little startled by seeing the Cheshire Cat sitting on a bough of a tree a few yards off. The cat only grinned when it saw Alice. It looked good-natured, she thought. Still, it had very long claws and a great many teeth, so she felt it ought to be treated with respect. Cheshire Puss, she began rather timidly, as she did not know whether it would like a name. However, it only grinned a little wider. Come, it's pleased so far, thought Alice, and she went on. Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to, said the cat. I don't much care where, said Alice. Then it doesn't matter which way you go, said the cat. As long as I can get somewhere, Alice added as an explanation. Oh, you're sure to do that, said the cat, if you only walk long enough. Alice felt that this could not be denied, so she tried another question. What sort of people live about here? In that direction, the cat said, waving its right paw around, lives a hatter, and in that direction, waving the other paw, lives a March hare. Visit either you like. They're both mad. But I don't want to go among mad people, Alice remarked. Oh, you can't help that, said the cat. We're all mad here. I'm mad, you're mad. How do you know I'm mad, said Alice. You must be, said the cat, or you wouldn't have come here. Alice didn't think it proved it at all, however, she went on. And how do you know that you're mad? To begin with, said the cat, a dog's not mad. You grant that? I suppose so, said Alice. Well then, the cat went on, you see a dog growls when it's angry and wags its tail when it's pleased. Now I growl when I'm pleased and wag my tail when I'm angry. Therefore, I'm mad. I call it purring, not growling, said Alice. Call it what you like, said the cat. Do you play croquet with the Queen today? I should like that very much, said Alice, but I haven't been invited yet. You'll see me there, said the cat, and vanished. Alice was not much surprised at this. She was getting so well used to queer things happening. While she was still looking at the place where it had been, it suddenly appeared again. By the by, what became of the baby, said the cat. I nearly forgotten to ask. It turned into a pig, Alice answered very quietly, just as if the cat had come back in a natural way. I thought it would, said the cat, and vanished again. Alice waited a little, half expecting to see it again, but it did not appear, and after a minute or two she walked in the direction in which the March Hare was said to live. I've seen hatters before, she said to herself. The March Hare will be much more interesting, and perhaps, as this is May, it won't be raving mad, at least not so mad as it was in March. As she said this, she looked up, and there was the cat again, sitting on a branch of a tree. Did you say pig or fig? Said the cat. I said pig, replied Alice, and I wish you wouldn't keep appearing and vanishing so suddenly. You make one quite giddy. All right, said the cat, and this time it vanished quite slowly, beginning with the end of the tail and ending with a grin, which remained some time after the rest of it had gone. Well, I've often seen a cat without a grin, thought Alice, but a grin without a cat is the most curious thing I ever saw in all my life. She had not gone much further before she came inside the house of the March Hare. She thought it must be the right house because the chimneys were shaped like ears and the roof had thatched with fur. It was so large a house that she did not like to go nearer till she had nibbled some more of the left-hand bit of mushroom, and raised herself to about 2 feet high. Even then she walked up towards it rather timidly, saying to herself, suppose it should be raving mad after all. I'd almost wish I'd gone to see the hatter instead. Pretty cool, right? So, without further ado, here's the one and only Deven Kane. Deven is reading from his latest release. It's book 3, not a book 1, I know, but honestly, Deven's a great reader, and he's also a great writer, and definitely is worth the read. So I'm going to quit buttering him up right now because I got a lot more to talk about him tomorrow. But for now, here's Deven Kane.
Hello, I'm Deven Kane. As a writer, my favorite genres include dystopian sci-fi and what I like to call supernatural thrillers set on other worlds. What's more important is that I know Josh Pantalleresco. We met at a writers' conference a couple of years ago, and I've had the privilege of getting to know him better through, wait for it, more writing conferences, and also a lot of Zoom meetings during this year from the black nebula known as 2020. If there's one thing that stands out about Josh, beyond his obvious talents in writing, comics, and podcasts, it's his instinct to inspire and encourage everyone he meets. When it comes to paying it forward, Josh is way ahead of the curve. I'm going to be reading from Scorpion, which is the third and final book in my Tracker trilogy. Yes, I know, I'm reading from the last book of the trilogy, but it just came out a few weeks ago, so it's fresh in my mind and I'm excited about it. The backdrop to the trilogy, and this is actually the back cover blurb from the very first book, reads as follows. 2 generations ago, Earth's richest citizens, the Hoarders, seized control of the planet's resources, retreated into their heavily guarded enclaves, and left the rest of the population to fend for itself. Until recently, when the Hoarders began to randomly implant people with a new kind of microtechnology capable of converting their unsuspecting hosts into violent and deadly automatons. They also created the Trackers, mechanically and chemically enhanced creatures fanatically devoted to hunting down and killing anyone unlucky enough to have an implant. Amos Morgan and Aubrey Carter, together with a small band of fellow runners, must unravel the mystery, racing against time before the Trackers discover them, and before their own implants change them into something else. Now, each book of the trilogy is written from several different characters' point of view. I'm going to read 3 short scenes, each one from a different character's perspective. First, Amos Morgan. He's one of the main protagonists, the first character you meet in the trilogy, in fact. And he's wrestled with PTSD so long that his inner voice has developed a caustic personality all of its own. The background to this scene is Amos has just narrowly escaped an ambush by a kill squad of Trackers, and he's sought refuge outside the city. What he doesn't know is that he's been followed. Amos awoke with a start, every sense on instant nail-biting alert. Outside the cave, the darkness was absolute, the profound silence eerie. Something had interrupted his sleep, something more disturbing than the chaotic memories of the Tracker ambush. He stretched his arms and legs, feeling the protest in his aching limbs, eyes riveted on the forest outside. The stony surface and cold temperature were no help to his stiff body, but his mind was crystal clear. He rose to his hands and knees and crept to the cave's entrance, poking his head out to survey his surroundings. The wind gusted for a moment, the tall pines creaking in response. Amos panned back and forth, once, twice. He was on his third pass when he spotted the darker-than-dark silhouette advancing on his position. The anonymous figure was taking its time, moving with great stealth. Amos squinting, wishing the moonlight would provide better illumination. Suddenly, without warning, a terrifying circle of red light flared into blazing intensity. His pursuer had recklessly abandoned any further attempt at camouflage. Amos's heart skipped a beat and then began to race in concert with the adrenaline in his veins. A tracker! How did it find me? My implant's been gone for months. A shadow passed between Amos and the moon's surreal glow. Startled, he looked above the skulking tracker, in time to see a dark shape dropping like a stone. There was no time to react. The tracker was flattened under the impact of the falling shadow. An arm was raised, clutching a round object, and then struck downward with vicious intent. Once, twice. The tracker lay where it had fallen, unmoving, lifeless. The shadow rose to its feet, both hands held out, palm up. A round object fell from one of its hands, landing with a solid thud on the ground. The figure crouched, holding its empty hands up and away from its body. Its voice carried to him, hardly above a whisper. "Good welcome, Amos. I trust you slept well." Amos crawled out of the cave, hampered by the stiffness in his cold limbs. Taking a cue from his unexpected visitor, he kept his voice down. "Mateo? I guess I should start with thanks, but how'd you know where to find me?" "I seem to have made a tactical error," Mateo replied, his voice a husky whisper. "I followed you after the attack. I failed on one account. The givers are now aware of my continued existence after our unfortunate incident yesterday." "Unfortunate incident," Amos repeated, eyebrows raised. "That's what you call a surprise attack by a tracker kill squad?" Mateo cocked his head to one side, his odd expression accented by the moonlight. "This tracker wasn't pursuing you." He gestured to the lifeless form a few meters away. "And for that I must apologize. It was hunting me, and by trailing you I've exposed you now to the same threat." He straightened, the red light under his skin coming to life as he pivoted in a slow circle, surveying their surroundings with painstaking care. Once he completed his scan, he nodded, and the red glow faded into obscurity. "We're alone for the moment." Mateo's voice held an unfamiliar note of anxiety. "But I'm afraid my error may have complicated matters. As I said, the givers are now aware that I continue to exist. They'll seek to correct that." "If the hoarders don't get you first," Amos replied. "I got the impression Darcy doesn't like you very much." Mateo lifted his head a fraction, a puzzled frown crossing his face. "Only together can you hope to defeat the aliens. This alliance must survive." Amos shrugged, the tension between his shoulder blades morphing into a headache. "Yeah, so you keep telling us." He gestured at the dead tracker. "Well, if they're hunting both of us now, where to next?" Mateo straightened to his full height. "The Enclave, of course." Amos shook his head, wincing at the sharp pain answering from his neck. "Somehow, I knew you were going to say that." End of scene. Now switch characters. Megan Sinclair was 18 years old when the hoarders kidnapped her, stripped her of her humanity, and recreated her as a tracker. 5 years later, after a failed mission, the hoarders abandoned her, leaving her for dead. Amos and his fellow runners took her in, and as she recovered, she began the arduous task of gradually recovering her humanity. In this scene, Megan has just received an experimental treatment which has gone horribly wrong. Megan landed hard on an unyielding surface. A massive weight settled on her chest, pinning her down. She panicked, unable to breathe. Her ears popped as if she'd fallen down a steep mountainside, and the thudding of her heart rattled through her bones. The whirlwind of mental images winked out of existence, with the exception of one. The solitary image refused to disappear. On the contrary, it expanded until it dominated her mind's eye. Then the image asserted control. She was inside it. This wasn't a hallucination. It was a memory. She saw again the two technological devices cupped in the palm of an unknown hand. Once more she heard her own cries of panic and despair. "Why are you doing this to me? We didn't betray you. Don't turn me into one of them." "Will somebody please shut her up?" Megan fastened eagerly on the exasperated voice. This was more than she remembered the last time. Another voice, female, responded to the first. "As you wish, counselor." The two mechanical devices, processors she realized, mental processors intended for her, flickered and vanished from sight. The crushing pressure on her ribs lifted, and she felt almost weightless with its departure. She gasped, gulping in great draughts of oxygen, and then she was back in the infirmary. Her vision cleared. Dr. Simon leaned over her, brow furrowed with worry. "Megan, can you hear me?" Doc repeated the question over and over. Megan heard the anguish in her voice. "Don't try to speak, Megan. Just nod if you understand what I'm saying." Megan levered herself up on her elbows, grimacing at the pain in her joints. "Everything hurts. It's like I've run a marathon or something." She nodded at the doctor and managed a weary smile. "I hear you fine, Doc." Doc's eyes widened and Megan bolted upright. "That was me. That was my voice. Doc, you heard me, right? I'm not still hallucinating, am I?" Doc laughed, her anxious look melting into delighted relief. "Yes, Megan, I heard you, loud and clear. And if you're using words like hallucinate, I'd say you're just fine." Her laughter was contagious, and Megan's grin stretched wider. "It worked. Mateo's experiment, I mean. Listen, I can actually talk." Doc placed a hand on her shoulder, eyes full of merriment. "Yes, his crazy idea worked after all. Everyone's been worried sick about you. We thought Mateo killed you. Don almost took a machete to him. Wait here. I'll go tell the others you're okay." She turned to leave, but paused at the door, looking over her shoulder with an impish grin. "I'll just tell them you're awake. You can surprise them when they get here." Megan nodded with a smile, and Doc was gone. Megan sat cross-legged in the middle of the gurney, studying her hands. She flexed them over and over, grateful as the stiffness faded. She felt like she'd been run over by a truck. A heavy lock of her hair fell forward, covering her remaining eye. She pushed it back with one hand, tucking it behind her ear. She felt lighter than she had in weeks. And to be able to speak again, that was worth everything, even the nightmarish visions she'd been forced to endure. She fastened on one specific memory, the final moment before the hoarders stole her humanity and transformed her into a tracker. Megan smiled again, a much darker smile than before. That voice she'd heard in her memory, the one they called the counselor. She remembered him. And switch scenes again. And characters. Aubrey Carter was living a normal small-town life before the hoarders gave her an implant. Ever since, her life has been hell. Now, as the story nears its climax, she and her fellow runners are poised for the final all-or-nothing battle. In this scene, Aubrey and her nemesis, Jane Avery, find themselves in the very clinic where the hoarders first gave them their implants. Aubrey found Jane slumped in the corner of a small examining room. She sat motionless on the floor. One hand covered her face while the other fidgeted with a strap on the backpack beside her. She didn't look up as Aubrey entered. Aubrey flicked on the overhead lights, bathing the room in a sterile glow. She stood just inside the door, leaning on the frame. "I have no memory of this place." Jane's voice was muffled behind her hand. "But I guess I was here last night. This is the hellhole where they do the implants, isn't it?" Aubrey shuddered as she glanced around the utilitarian room. A sink mounted on the wall, a chair, a folding cot, and a faint but distinct odor she couldn't identify. "That's what Mateo says," she replied, shivering. "I don't remember being here either, but this must be where it began for me too. I guess Mateo's right. It's the last place Darcy would think to look for us." Jane dropped her hands, staring at the ceiling, shaking her head in a slow arc. "Darcy," she snarled, baring her teeth. "I wished you'd shot him when you had the chance." Aubrey stared at the floor, unsure how to respond. She heard a distant echo of Doc Simon's voice in her head. "You're not a murderer." Jane reached down, opening the flap of her backpack, and rummaged through its contents. Aubrey tensed as Jane pulled out her handgun, cradling it in both hands. She stood and approached Aubrey, holding out the gray-blue pistol, handle first. "Take it." She shoved the weapon into Aubrey's reluctant hands. "Keep it with you, all the time, no exceptions." Aubrey's hand shook. She stared at the gun with horrid fascination. "Jane, I can't. I hate what Darcy did to us, everything that he stands for, but it's not for Darcy," Jane interrupted, her temper flaring. She took a shaky breath, controlling herself with visible effort. "It's your turn, country girl. If you see me start to change, if my implant takes me over." She gestured at the gun, her voice filled with loathing. "I won't be one of Darcy's brainwashed assassins. Promise me, if you see it starting, you'll use this." "Jane, no." Aubrey tried to push the gun back into her hands. "Doc Simon can remove the implants, remember?" Jane laughed. "Doc's a long way from here." She lifted her hands, palm out, refusing to accept the gun. "You couldn't shoot me." Aubrey looked up from the gun, her eyes pleading. "When my implant activated, you had the chance, but you couldn't go through with it." Jane shrugged, dropping her hands as she backed away. "Then you're going to have to be stronger than I was, Aubrey." End of scene. Anyways, Josh, thank you for this opportunity to read. If you're interested in hearing more about the books, devenkane.com is where you can find links and short synopsis for each of the stories. And hey, you could even get a free prequel short story about the Rubicon. It's called Rubicon. It's about the whole Tracker universe. And if you wanted to get that for free, sign up for the newsletter. And that's me doing advertising, and I'll stop that now. Josh, I apologize if that's bad behavior. Anyways, thank you again for the opportunity to do this, and I look forward to the interview in a couple of days. Bye for now, Josh. Sleep well. Watch out for trackers.
That's it, ladies and gentlemen. That was Deven Kane. Take a look at his webpage, which is listed in the description below. Click on his link, check out all his books, and like I said, Devin's going to be my guest tomorrow night on twitch.tv/justjoshing podcast. So feel free to subscribe there. Feel free to check out my YouTube channel. Like I said, I'm going to be growing the podcast, and I'm just basically what I've done is I've scaled it up. So hopefully you guys, whether you want to watch a podcast or you want to listen to a podcast, it's there for you to however you want to do it. The important thing is keep listening and keep spreading the word. I'm thankful to each and every one of you that do listen to it. So without further ado, that'll do it for this episode of Just Joshing. If you want to support the podcast, you can do so a number of different ways. Subscribe to the podcast. I'm on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, Stitcher, Deezer, and Audible. On top of the fact that I'm also now on YouTube and Twitch. Click the subscribe button, leave reviews, let people know I'm out there. Buy my books, Alice Zero, The Cloud Diver, currently available on Amazon. Very soon, The Lights Go Out, December 25th. Outside of that, buy my merchandise, check out my newsletter, subscribe to my Patreon. If you guys want to support me, there's lots of different ways you can do it. However you do decide to do it, though, thank you very much for listening. Stay inspired. Keep striving in the chaos. Do remember that the darkness does not last forever. Eventually, light does shine through. But until then, guys, take care of yourselves.
Josh.